Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm ready to do my first impressions on this. This is the Vero Axon, and I am thrilled that this knife is here, that it is mine. If you watched my unboxing of this knife, you'll probably see it was one of the most excited personal unboxings for me. It's very, very rare that I pre-order a knife. It hardly ever happens, because personally I'm not a huge fan of like tying up the money that a knife costs right now and then not getting it for months. When the way that I go through knives, I'm often like buying, selling, and trading and kind of recycling the same money through different knives over and over and over, and a lot happens in a few months. And so it's a big commitment for me to pre-order a knife. I know for a lot of people they prefer it, and I'm not necessarily against it either. I just don't usually kind of participate with a level of regularity that other people do. So this was the first knife in a long time that I pre-ordered, and I pre-ordered it after I had been lucky enough to check out the Impulse and the Synapse that my buddy Jason loaned to me from the Millie Club. And after checking those out and seeing that this was on the horizon, I immediately was like, that's the design that I want. And I was stoked about the features that it came with, the price point it came in at. And so I was really lucky that I was able to pre-order one and that I got the spec that I wanted, because I really wanted natural micarta and belt satin for this model. I think it's fantastic. I do plan to pre-order this week the Isotope, which on that one I'm thinking I'm going to try to get the end cut carbon fiber, the black end cut carbon fiber. He does black or red, and I'm going to do the hand satin. And I think it's going to have this cool directional flow to it, to have the hand satin where the grain on the grind, the grit, whatever you want to call it, moves this way on the blade, and then that end cut carbon fiber will also move kind of in the same direction. I think it'll look cool. So hopefully I can get one of those as well. But I wanted to knock out my first impressions on this guy, because I've actually carried it now for really 2 days. Usually I do this after 1 day, but this is just when I'm filming it. So there's going to be a full review once I've had this in pocket for at least a week, and once I've done more cutting with it than I have up to now, which I haven't done all that much yet. So that's part of why that part of the process exists. But it also, part of my process on reviewing knives, and I've talked about this a few times, and if you watch my reviews, you'll already know this is part of my process, but I like to do the unboxing. I like to do the first impressions, which I don't think generally should, in my opinion, kind of go with the unboxing, because I guess you could call that a first impressions, but for me, first impressions means like I've started walking around with it. It's been in pocket. I've maybe cut something with it. I've felt the knife a little more than I possibly can that moment it comes out of the box. So I'd like to do that first impression separately, about a day after, and then I like to do a full review once it's been at least a week. And the reason for that gap between those times, for me personally, is I find I learn a lot about knives in that at least week-long process, and taking the time to like let the knife impress me where it'll impress me and disappoint me where it'll disappoint me, and like win me over in areas where maybe it didn't in the first impressions. That takes a little bit of time. So a good example of that is my reviews of the Synapse and the Impulse. Those first impressions, frankly, were not that positive. I wasn't that excited about the knives. I had heard so much hype about them, and I got them in hand. I was kind of confused about them, and there were features I didn't get. And then I had the chance to talk to Joseph, and then I carried them more and used them more and kind of understood what he was going for with the knives. And then my full reviews of them were very positive. That's a case where like the time did make a difference. And so I like to allow myself the space for that to happen. So that's going to happen here as well. And I feel like this was the right place to say that, because the other Vero examples are ones that I cite with the Synapse and the Impulse for reasoning why that process is important to me. Anyway, this is awesome. There are a couple of things about it that I would consider not my favorite. There's a couple of things that I would tweak about it personally But overall, I'm thrilled with this knife. So we're going to go over kind of what I've been finding so far and what I've been enjoying and what's maybe bothered me a little bit about it. So again, overall, stoked about the knife. Let's start with just kind of a material breakdown of what the knife is made of, and then we'll jump into my typical talking points of like ergos, carry, cutting, and action. So the blade on this guy, much like every Vero, I think, that has come out so far, and everyone that is announced in the pipeline, is M390 blade steel. So I really, really like M390. I'm happy with that choice, and I think it looks great. This one, like I said, is finished in belt satin, and I really like the belt satin that Bestech does for Vero on these knives. It just looks fantastic to me. Then we've got natural micarta, and I love natural micarta. This also came in some G10 versions, some carbon versions, again, kind of end cut carbon, I think. And I know he's shown some brass ones now too. I think there may have been copper as well. So quite a few scale options on this guy. We have a backspacer that is full titanium. I think it looks really good, and I like that it keeps kind of a closed construction. Sometimes I dig open construction. I think on here, this kind of closed construction was the way to go. We have a titanium pocket clip. It looks just like all other Vero pocket clips to me. I don't have the other ones in hand, so it's hard for me to compare at the moment, but stylistically, it's another Vero clip. Obviously on this one we have, as you've already hopefully noticed, there are slots on both sides. I believe the Vero group on Facebook has deemed that these are to be called the V-slot, if I'm not mistaken. And so this model is the first that I'm aware of, again, that has had them on both sides, which is cool. Because although I personally like the look of the totally sterile show side, and again, like on the Isotope, which is coming out, the show side doesn't get a slot, and I think it looks gorgeous on that one. I think on this model especially, it kind of makes sense to me to, since you don't have the flipper tab, to be able to thumb flick it, and to be able to middle finger flick it, and to be able to front flip it. That's really cool to me. Plus, if you're a lefty, that's going to be a big, strong suit. So to be able to middle finger flick it and have a way to do that would be nice if you're left-handed. So yeah, those are our materials externally. And then internally, we have a nested liner lock, and it's on both sides. We've got full liners nested. They're titanium liners, but I don't know how well this will come through. It's about as close as I can get with it retaining focus, but there's actually a stainless steel insert on the lock bar, which I find really cool considering this is a liner lock and not a frame lock. I feel like on most liner locks you don't see an insert added, and so that's just nice since it's a titanium liner that he's gone so far as to put a hardened steel insert on there. And with how thin it is, it just looks really cool the way it's been mounted in there. It looks great. We've got a ceramic detent, and I think there's a detent ramp on here. I feel like there is one. It's hard for me to see, but yeah, there is. So there is a detent ramp as well, which is a feature that I think should become more prevalent. I think that's kind of the next phase of what makes a good detent. And Vero can already handle, and Bestech is building these, making a proper detent that has the right kind of pressure build for it, and it's a good ceramic detent. So the fact that they also went so far as to put a ramp on it, excellent, excellent, excellent news in my book. So another thing to note as well, these titanium liners internally they've had a pretty extensive amount of weight reduction. So they're drilled out pretty heavily. There's a lot of material removed, and that's a good thing because it makes this knife really, really light. This is much lighter than I was expecting it to be before having it in hand. And the few people that I've handed this to in person to show it to have all commented on how light it feels. So kudos to that in terms of construction. All of these components are really, really good, especially considering the price that these came in at. So that being said, let's bump right into ergos. One of the things on the Impulse and the Synapse that kind of bothered me was I found the clip to be a hotspot on both of them. More so, I think, on the Synapse, if I remember correctly. But this, it doesn't bother me nearly as much. I can still feel it. I feel that the clip is there. No matter what grip I get into on this knife, I feel the clip for sure, but it doesn't feel as pokey and proddy as it did on the Synapse and the Impulse. So I was pleasantly surprised to find that for my hand, the clip kind of agrees more in this one. Ergonomically, other than that note, this is really, really good. I love the ergos kind of in this, what I would consider the main portion of the handle, where I imagine most people intuitively will grab this knife. The size of this curve in here is just right for me to get 2 full fingers in, no more, no less, and that feels really locked in. It does also have this flat spot up here, like other Veros do. So now my pointer finger goes into what's kind of a choil. It's more of a flat. But then my next 2 fingers land in the curve, pinky falls behind, and I get this really good controlled sensation up here. I find myself using this grip the most. And I think when I talked to Joseph about the Impulse and the Synapse, he talked about how this is the way he holds his knives. So it makes sense to me that it feels so good in this grip. Yeah, it's just very, very nice. So I like it in a saber grip and a hammer grip up there. I like it in a hammer grip or a saber grip back here. I like it in a reverse grip, especially if I'm back and down, not choked up. Being choked up feels a little weird to me in a reverse grip, but this one feels great. Reverse grip draw cut is actually quite comfortable. That definitely works. And for grip draw cut, I don't think I mentioned, that feels really, really good. So it's a nice, like, fairly neutral profile. The fact that it feels pretty good in just about every grip is a good thing. I like it when handles are neutral but still have enough shaping that I feel locked in, because I genuinely do feel really locked in on this knife. The only jimping you're going to find in the most traditional spot is going to be right here. It's non-aggressive jimping. It's not trying to tear up my finger. It feels quite comfortable to actually use, so I like that jimping. Plus, it's absolutely necessary because that's how you front flip it. So you got to have that little bit of jimping there, at least at the top of that portion. So it makes sense where the jimping is placed and it's functional. So yeah, ergos are a win. Let's talk about carry. Carry on this guy is in some ways fantastic, but one of my only kind of gripes about the knife is it's funny because the pocket clip used to bother me on the previous models. Pardon me. The pocket clip used to bother me on the previous models a little bit because it was kind of hot spotty in hand, and now that, like I said, isn't as much of an issue. Now it's more so the clearance underneath it. There's just not a lot of space underneath this clip, so I've found right now, it's January, even in Southern California, it's cooler here than normal, and so I'm not wearing shorts. I'm wearing jeans just about every day, or at least pants. And so in every pocket that I've put it in, this clip is tighter than I'd like it to be. If you're wearing really thick jeans, it might even be a problem to get this all the way into your pocket. It's just not a big space underneath the clip. And so that said, like, the tension of the clip feels about right to me. The way the clip feels in hand feels better to me than the other ones did. Like, it's just in and out of pocket. I find myself like needing to use my left hand to hold my pocket tight to shove this in, and then when I go to draw the knife out of my pocket, I've carried it front right pocket each time that I've carried it, because this is absolutely a primary size for me. Every time I've gone to draw it out, not every time, most of the time, I have to kind of fight with it to get it out of my pocket, which is a little bit of a bummer. So I found myself kind of grabbing the bottom of the clip and like lifting as I draw the knife out of pocket. That seems to help, but it's not as intuitive and quick to get out of pocket as most knives that I like to keep in the primary spot. So it's just something I have to be aware of when that's the primary that's in my pocket, that it might be kind of a bummer to get out of my pocket quickly if I need it. So yeah, other than that, the profile and the lightness of this knife make it awesome. Once it's in pocket and it's just staying there for a little bit, it's slimmer this way than, slimmer this way than I think I was expecting it to be. It's not very thick this way. It's not insanely long. You get a really good blade to handle ratio out of this knife, so the handle doesn't feel unwieldy, and when it's folded, it's just a nice package. It's nice and slim. It's contoured everywhere. The micarta has a little bit of grip to it, but it's not overly gritty, so it's just a comfortable profile to have in pocket. There's no flipper tab or anything to jab your hand on, although when Vero does use flipper tabs, they're kind of a vertical tab anyways, so those don't even get in the way. But it's just a nice smooth profile everywhere, and the lightness is what really keeps impressing me. So really my only gripe with carry is the space underneath the pocket clip is just a little less than I'd like to see. If the pocket clip sat a little taller, if it was stood up a little bit more and you had some more room for your pants material, I think it would be a good thing. All right, so that's carry and ergos. Let's talk action. Obviously on here I've already talked about there are multiple deployment methods, so you can, that's hard for me to do. You can use your thumb with the kind of show side slot. You can middle finger flick it, which I do probably 90% of the time, realistically. I love middle finger flicking this knife. It's just so easy with that V slot, if you will. And then of course it's designed to be a front flipper, which I think on the Synapse you can front flip it as well, but on here it's made to be a front flipper, and it works really, really well for me. I've got it down to where it's just easy and consistent, and the detent feels like it's tuned right for front flipping and for middle finger flicking. It's just, it's right for it. It feels really good. On closing this knife, it's not stupid drop shutty. I haven't added any KPL or done any adjustment on here since it came out of the box or anything, so it's not like free dropping. I could probably tune it to be so, but I don't have any incentive to take this knife apart yet. I'm just enjoying it too much. And with a little shake of the wrist, as you can see, it closes all the way. It's a very, very nice action. Everything about it is smooth. There's no gritty sounds, no gritty sensations here. Everything feels really, really good to me. So action is a big, big win. This knife is a blast to fidget with, and I've been fidgeting with it pretty much nonstop since it got here. So yeah, the last category is going to be cutting performance. This blade I am in love with. I dig Wharncliffe's and sheep's feet, I don't know how you would say that, sheep's foot blades. I dig this type of profile in general. And the fact that it's got this gorgeous belt satin on it that looks so good, but then also that it's just, I've found it to be really, really functional. I love that he uses M390. I get great performance out of his blades. This just feels excellent. It's a nice tall flat grind, like really tall, most of the blade tall, and so you get a nice thin behind the edge profile. You get a very workable tip, and it just works really, really well. Joseph has talked a lot about how his prototype Axon kind of became his like go-to around the office, like unboxing knife and stuff, and I can see why. It's just a blast to actually use this blade. I also love how kind of straight the edge is. You just get this really nice even surface to cut with, and it just feels like it goes right where you want it to. Like you have really good control, and you can always tell where the edge is, and I don't know. I've thoroughly enjoyed the little bit of cutting I've done with it so far, which has just been, frankly, opening a couple of boxes. I did process this morning, I think 2 big boxes for the dumpster, and so I've done like some cardboard processing, some just generic box opening, and I've opened a couple of envelopes, like just mail with it, and it's done really well. So the blade is a big win for me so far. I'm definitely enjoying it. So where does that leave us? The gripes that I have about it really are the pocket clip. The pocket clip is not my favorite. Oh, the one other thing that I forgot to mention. I mentioned this briefly in my unboxing. I already noticed it, but the access to the lock bar, it's interesting because, let me see if this will show it a little more. When the lock bar is flush up against the scale like it is right now, you can see the scale sticks a little bit proud of the actual lock bar tab itself. So the show side is cut in such a way that I can still get my thumb in there pretty well, but it doesn't feel like, it feels interesting because I'm also at the same time I'm running into the micarta. I'm not just getting the lock bar tab right there. So I think if the lock bar tab was like a millimeter further up in comparison to that micarta, if it was actually flush with the line of the lock side scale instead of just being slightly nested downward into it, I'd get a little bit of a better sensation to access the lock bar. That said, that's a very nitpicky thing. I'm not having problems getting to it, clearly, and it's not like hurting my finger to get to it. There's no jimping on it at all, let alone aggressive jimping. Like, it's not tearing up my finger. It's not a problem. But if I'm being nitpicky about like the minutia of this knife, it is something that I've noticed I think could be slightly better if that just filled that space a tiny bit more, so that I wasn't like running into the micarta while I'm trying to just get the lock bar. Super small thing. But yeah, that and the pocket clip being kind of shallow are my two things that are not perfect about this knife. Literally everything else about it I have adored so far. Like, genuinely just really, really enjoyed. I've liked carrying it. I've liked using it. I've just had a great time with it. I have genuinely had a lot of fun with this knife in the 2 days so far that I've had it in pocket. And I don't know. I feel like this is also the Vero that most clicks with me in terms of what I look for in a knife so far. It feels a little bit outdoorsier than the other ones. It just has, like, I don't know, the blade shape I connect with. I dig it. I love the way it looks. I love the way it functions. I love natural micarta. I love how light it is. This knife continues every time I pick it up to surprise me how light it is. It's just really, really well done. So obviously my first impressions are quite good. I like it a lot. Plus, I'm freaking super lucky, and I got literally knife number 5, which is crazy. I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but it's these are numbered, and I somehow got number 5, which is just makes it extra cool that I got a low number of a knife that I'm really vibing with, and it's very, very cool. So I guess that'll be that. That's my first impressions of the Vero Axon. There's plenty more to come. I will be doing a full review soon on this guy once I've had some more experience with it and enjoyed it some more. But those are my thoughts so far, and I'll see you guys on the next one.